Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of the Psychedelic Policy Forum. I'm your host, Noah Potter. I'm an attorney practicing law in New York City, commercial litigation primarily since 2000. Also a commentator on cannabis and psychedelic law and policy. I blog at the New Amsterdam Psychedelic Law blog at psychedeliclaw.com. I'm a former chair and current member of the New York City Bar Association's Committee on Drugs and the Law, which, in the context of which I've organized several cutting-edge events discussing cutting-edge issues in drug law and drug policy. I'm also one of the organizers of the New York City Cannabis Parade. I've been organizing since 2011. It's a proud event with a long-standing heritage, and I'm proud to have been a part of it and to done my part to keep it going. I've handled legal matters, permit applications, and negotiations with the city. And I have been studying drug law, drug policy, and big picture issues since the early 1990s as an undergraduate political science student. I created the Psychedelic Policy Forum in order to create a space, a video space, in which to discuss policy regarding psychedelics. What does that mean? In my experience on the internet, you can find psychedelic art, psychedelic music. You can find discussion groups in which people share their own personal experiences with psychedelics, ask each other questions, and you can find talks by Terence McKenna, Dennis McKenna, and discussions of psychedelics and spirituality, relationship, if any, between psychedelics and Buddhism, for example. But I have not to date found an environment in which persons interested in policy reform, legal reform, can speak about what will be the elements of a legal market for psychedelic substances. And I choose the term legal market intentionally. The common discourse uses the term legalizing a drug, legalizing marijuana, legalizing well, marijuana is the primary subject of discussion. It's few and far between to find discussions of legalizing opiates or cocaine, for example. But the term legalizing a drug is nonsensical. You legalize a market for a product in commerce. There are many products that pass in commerce that are very dangerous. Nuclear weapons are dangerous. They're legal in a certain sense. Kitchen knives are legal. Cars are legal. Cars are very dangerous, can be. They're legal as well, subject to licensing and registration. Numerous psychoactive substances, alcohol is a toxin that's available for purchase by adults. There are numerous substances that are available by prescription that experience has shown can be very detrimental. Various prescription opiates, for example. There is, as of yet, no legal market for psychedelic substances, and I refer to the substances in Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, LSD, ibogaine, psilocybin, the DMT. And the purpose of this forum is to engage in the thought experiment. What would be the elements of such a regulated market? And it's necessary to do the thought experiment, because if you want to see it happen, you need to design it. And no time like the present, and no one like us to take the initiative. So, having explained the background and the impetus for creating a psychedelic policy forum, I'd like to comment a little bit on the current environment. When I began my studies in the early 90s, there was no medical marijuana movement. There was a movement, it was very small. It was marginalized. It had taken the form of individual patients who had pushed for access to cannabis from the federal government in what some of you might know as the compassionate IND, through which the federal government currently does still supply cannabis to a handful, 4 patients who survived from the program. This was before the Proposition 215 in 1996 created a statutory affirmative defense to prosecution for possession and use of cannabis for medical purposes. That was just a dream going forward. There is now a constituency for psychedelic policy reform that simply did not exist at that time. That constituency appears at the annual Horizons Conference here in New York City. The event has grown tremendously, indicates that there is a constituency that wants to engage in a discussion. The discussion, I think, to a large extent has been discussion of medical benefits, of spiritual connotations, and expansion of consciousness. What has not emerged to date is a political movement around rationalizing law and policy concerning psychedelics. My intention going forward is to bring guests, medical experts, legal experts, people who can speak from all the different disciplines, the learned disciplines, about not just psychedelics, but generally about how one creates a regulated market for a psychoactive substance. The psychoactive substances that are subject to discussion are problematic to integrating. Let me rephrase that. They don't fit the mold. Cannabis, for example, is difficult. On the one hand, it's a food. On the other hand, it's a drug. On the one hand, it's a recreational substance. On the other hand, it has therapeutic uses. It does not fit the standard dichotomies. It does not easily integrate with the existing structure. Ergo, when you do integrate such a substance into the existing structure, you transform the existing regulatory structure. Likewise, psychedelics, the higher psychedelics, shall we say, also integrate. Integration quite possibly will require structural change. And that's the task at hand. To organize, to encourage the people who are, the persons out there, the many persons who are sympathetic to integration of psychedelic substances into society, into a political movement that will, I believe, will optimally learn the lessons of the cannabis legalization movement and use those experiences to identify the areas of policy reform, areas of policy that will require reform. Just a word about the cannabis legalization movement. The experiences of the last 20 years at this point, I believe, have indicated, offer a helpful guide to the types of work that will need to be done, the areas that need to be thought through. Issues for the cannabis legalization movement, seen very clearly in Colorado, include standardizing dosages, especially for edible products, licensing of manufacturing and distribution facilities. Driving under the influence is a very significant issue, complicated by the long-term residue, shall we say, of THC in the body that makes it difficult for law enforcement to determine the degree of influence of the psychoactive substance on the driver. Likewise, I trust that will be an issue for a legal psychedelic market. Authorization of the persons to oversee a psychedelic experience. Is that person going to be necessarily a psychiatrist? Could it be a leader of a voluntary association of people who get together to share the experience? Must it be a shaman of a recognized spiritual tradition? These are all questions that must be addressed in order to move us forward. Further episodes, I hope to talk about the history of psychedelics. I'll make the argument that the use of psychedelics in therapy as prospective pharmacotherapies did not die a natural death. It was induced as a casualty of the Nixon drug war and has not yet been resurrected fully. Notwithstanding the progress of the cannabis legalization movement, I believe, has opened the door for discussions of the next stage I believe that we are, and I would characterize our current time as a pre-psychedelic stage of civilization. In order to move us forward, we will need to engage with the practical policy issues, and that's what I wish and hope to do with you going forward. My next segment will be an interview with the founder of the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society, Daniel Miller. Please stay tuned. Thanks for joining me.